So we've completed the first argument of the chapter. Of course, here I think it would be perhaps wrong to say an argument because unlike the Life Divine, it doesn't follow different arguments. But there's one main theme and he presents it in different ways, from different angles. That's the way we should put it. So, having discussed about the nature of man and the question of the battle of life, now we come to the last section, wherein he says, man meets the battle of life in the manner most consonant with the essential quality most dominant in his nature. See, now we are enlarging it to perhaps even a contemporary stage. You see, at that time we talked about the Kshatriya and the Brahmana, etc. But now he is taking a different angle, that each one of us does not necessarily belong to a caste, because the caste system, etc., is predominant in India. But on the global level, there is some other principle that is working. That's the principle of the gunas, the three gunas. That can be universally applicable. But actually, even when we speak of the four castes, even that is a universal principle. It's not just belonging to India. In India, that has stuck on. That became pretty rigid. And it lasted thousands of years. And with each generation getting into greater degradation. So today that has become a fossil. The caste system has been fossilized. It has lost its energy. So what we see is a kind of an external dying body. But this was so in the West also, in other cultures of East and West. Because principally they are the four levels of human society. You may call it Kshatriya, doesn't matter. You may call it the nobility, you may call the kings. And the Kshatriyas and the nobility and the kings were there everywhere. In every country has had this. And every country has had its own scientists, had its own researchers, had its own people who really looked after religion. They were the knowers, the Brahmins. Today you call them scientists and researchers and doctorates and philosophers and all that. But there's nothing but the Brahmin class. Then you have the mercantile. The whole world is full of business people now. You may call it IIT or IIM or this or that. So, in every civilization, we have this mercantile, those people who really produce wealth. And in every civilization, we have this service, work experts, specialists. You say, I'm a specialist in engineering, or somebody is a specialist in electricity, somebody is a great plumber. So we call them Shudras, the working class, but this specialization in the service area is there everywhere. Today you call them nurses. They have to undergo training for 4 years or 5 years. But there's a service. So let's not fight shy that this class system belongs only to India. It is a common human heritage under different nomenclature, but it's there everywhere. But unfortunately, in India, it has survived and it has deteriorated. But again, you read Aurobindo, you find fantastic secrets, He says, one of the reasons of India's perennial and this long existence of Indian civilization is its caste system. All other civilizations have vanished. But India of the Ramayana, India of the Kurukshetra, is the same today. I mean, you may not see it in your Bombay and Delhi and Calcutta and Chennai. But if you see on the village level, the same system, the same hierarchy, the same mentality, almost the same food, almost the same clothes. So there is a survival of this Indian culture, Indian civilization, not only culture, civilization. And one of the reasons is this caste system. In fact, I was surprised to see that when it says in the Mohammedan countries, in the Islamic countries, where there is no such caste system, they have not been able to form themselves into a nationhood. You see, even now the Middle East is boiling all the time. We have, of course, Iran and Iraq as nations. But this long continuity of a civilization was there because of these four castes, which today, last 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, that has become terrible. So that is one thing, as if this was the basic four bodies of society which has helped to carry on. The Brahmins carried on the Vedas down the line to thousands of years. The Kshatriyas carried on the chivalrous nature, which has become corrupt now. The mercantile carried on, which has become now global. The service people carried on. So these classes maintained very zealously their culture. Say, hey, I am a Kshatriya. So they tried to maintain the Kshatriya qualities, and that has run down the civilization. I mean, run along down these ages. However, coming back to what Sri Aurobindo is telling us now, the second universal principle could be the three gunas. That we all survive or work in this world based on our own gunas. And of course, there is a paragraph about these gunas which all of you know, so we can give it a quick reading. Man meets the battle in the manner most consonant with the essential quality most dominant in his nature. There are, according to the Sankhya philosophy accepted in this respect by the Gita, three essential qualities or modes of the world energy and therefore also of human nature. Sattva, the mode of poise, knowledge and satisfaction. Rajas, the mode of passion, action and struggling emotion. Tamas, the mode of ignorance and inertia. Please see the word, he says, this is the mode of the world energy. It is not just the human energy. Nature itself has got these three modes. And we being part of the creation of nature, obviously, we are controlled by these three gunas. So that is how you should understand it. It's not an arbitrary division saying the sattva, rajas and tamas. They are part of this nature of creation. These are the way the world forces work. And so, of these we know the sattva, the mode of poise, knowledge and satisfaction. But satisfaction not in the level of, the vital level. The satisfaction is more, you are content, you are satisfied. You are not really ambitious and eager to go on acquiring greater wealth and greater comfort and greater power. You are content with what you have. The minimum basic existence. That's what is the yogis, the sannyasins. They said, no, in the ashram life, we are content with what we have. That's a contentment. And then there is the pursuit of knowledge. And there is the mode of poise. Poise, this equilibrium is neither too much energetic nor tamasic. There is an inner poise. It's not just externally you look as sattvic, but there is a kind of a poise. It's a basic tenement of your personality. You are indrawn. You are detached. You don't have this kind of you are attracted to. But there is an inner poise. So that is the poise of the sattva. Then rajas, the mode of passion, action and struggling emotion. Because we have seen that rajas is the passion. But passion too is required for this action and struggling emotion. Because if there is no kind of, the petrol, the engine doesn't work. So rajas is that energy which acts like the petrol in an engine. It gives the energy to move. So if the sattva, if the rajas is completely withdrawn, you cannot act. Even the sattvic person, he would rot, he would rust. Because it's the rajas, the passion for movement, the passion for doing, the passion for conquering. Today the scientist and the businessman, everyone wants to conquer, wants to achieve, wants to succeed. This is the mode of rajas. And so you see, there's such a tremendous volcanic activity everywhere, bursting through new activity, new ideas, new things. That is the passion for conquest. And then of course you have the mode, the tamas, the mode of ignorance and inertia. Well, it is, all of us are in this mode of ignorance. So we are all in the tamas. And inertia, this lack of movement, the laziness, this kind of a non-initiativeness. You say, no, there's a difference between this contemplation, this contentment and inertia. A lot of people, they get content by inertia, not wanting to make an effort. What in French is called paresse, lazy. Sort of laziness also we can say, chalta, what mother has given me is good enough. But that could be a perfect laziness and not your contentment. So let's not confuse sattvic contentment with a tamasic inertia. Normally people do mistake because you don't have the guts and you don't have the passion to move. You say, you lie down, you say it's fine, I'm with my work. So that is the tamas. But one thing I would like to clarify here, tamas being what it is, we may ask the question, why is this there in nature or as a world energy as Aurobindo calls? If that is such a negative force, what is its function? Well, in nature it is there as a reservoir. It is there conservative in nature. It preserves. That is the function of the tamas in world nature. It preserves the past energies. And these energies are given back to the rajas and to the sattva. It's a storehouse of the past experience. You say, today if I want to build something or do something, there is a storehouse of knowledge, of experience. If each experience, imagine, if evaporated, then how would I be creative? Creativity is always attached to some experience of the past. So this is a kind of a storehouse. So in nature also, there is this knowledge, there is this experience which is stored. From there, new things come out. So we can say, in South India we have this kind of inertia in the sense that it has conserved and preserved so much of the spiritual energy here. So from here there could be the birth of saints and yogis much easier, because the substratum is made up of the spiritual energies. So that is the function of tamas as a world energy. Otherwise we can question, why should God create this kind of a tamas which has no utility in the world function? But obviously it has a great utility, a great positive thing about it. So now, dominated by tapas, man does not so much meet the rush and shock of the world energies whirling about him and converging upon him, as he succumbs to them, he is overcome by them afflicted, subjected, or at the most helped by the other qualities. The tamasic man seeks only somehow to survive, to subsist so long as he may, to shelter himself in the fortress of an established routine of thought and action, in which he feels himself to a certain extent protected from the battle, able to reject the demand which his higher nature makes upon him, excused from accepting the necessity of further struggle and the ideal of an increasing effort and mastery. You see, a perfect description of a tamasic man. That's what we are describing. That he does not meet the shock of the world energies, where there is action, there is debate, there is this thing. He says, no, I'm out of it. I'm cool about it, as you say in American language. You don't want to participate. You don't want to be creative. You say, no, it's a routine life. He says he is subject to, he likes this kind of a, somehow to survive, to subsist so long as he may. Without making any extra effort, he says, okay, 11:30 is my dining room hour. I go to dining room, 11:30 I come back. 4 o'clock I have to go somewhere. It's a kind of a minimum modicum of existence without any extra initiative. To shelter himself in the fortress of an established routine of thought and action. That is the description. To shelter himself in the fortress of an established routine of thought and action. So it doesn't mean that every day if you are going to do your work, and if every day at 10 o'clock you come to your office, that you are being Rajasic and Sattvic. No. It can be a dead routine. And most of this India's government offices are this. Absolute tamas. Which means that they are established in a routine of thought and action. One little extra thing you say, no, it's not my file, please send the file to the other person. And the other person says, it's not mine, is that the file keeps on moving, because nobody wants to have one more extra action or effort. Because they are so much dead in the routine that they don't want to take any initiative. The moment is, is this file number 561? No, it doesn't belong to my department. Just flick it over. So that is called shelter, fortress of an established routine, thought and action, in which he feels himself to a certain extent protected from the battle. Also able to reject the demand which his higher nature makes upon him. Sometimes you see, if you want to achieve something in the spiritual thing also, line also, you have to struggle. You have to make an extra effort. You have to try to achieve something. If I say, no, for last 30 years I've been doing this, it's okay. So it doesn't mean that you are progressing. So a dead routine is a sign of an absolute tamas. Because you feel protected, no extra effort, no extra responsibility. And then we see, dominated by rajas, man flings himself into the battle and attempts to use the struggle of forces for his own egoistic benefit, to slay, conquer, dominate, enjoy. So this is the other side. He will do anything extra, he will do anything more to say this question of slay, conquer, dominate and enjoy. Because for him this enjoyment and domination are there. Where the tamasic man is lazy, he even sacrifices his enjoyment. He says, as long as I'm not touched and disturbed, even the enjoyment, if I don't enjoy that party, doesn't matter. But who is going to go 5 kilometers and do all that enjoyment? मुझे चाहिए भी नहीं, enjoyment नहीं चाहिए, party नहीं चाहिए, कुछ भी नहीं चाहिए. I am at home. And I have a small TV at home and I am fair, good enough with that. So that is not there. Whereas the Rajasic man, he says, no, if I don't have a car, I'll go. But I need to go to that party. That verb of enjoyment, joie de vivre, as we say. That is very dominant. So that is their domination, conquer. Conquer means not just conquer the countries, but conquer himself, conquer his own, attitudes and his desires. Or helped by a certain measure of the sattvic quality, the Rajasic man makes the struggle itself a means of increasing inner mastery, joy, power and possession. Now this same Rajasic man, if he is guided by the sattva, then he becomes a pretty ideal person. Because what is he doing? That he increases the inner mastery, joy and power and possession. The same question of the outer joy, now he says, let me find the inner joy. But at least there is this man who is ready to take the trouble. If some sadhu says, you meditate, you do this, you read that, then he says, oh, if it's going to increase my inner joy, I will do that. But you tell that to the tamasic man, he says, no, yaar. God has given me my daily bread and my shelter. That is enough. So here he says, inner joy, power and possession. The battle of life becomes his delight and passion, partly for its own sake, for the pleasure of activity and the sense of power, partly as a means of his increase and natural development. So he is the man who is the most dynamic, who moves from action to sense power to delight and passion. He may be a kshatriya, he may be a businessman, he may be everything, but somebody, as we say, on the move. That man, if it turns to yoga, he'll be the best man. He'll be the most perfect instrument. Because his dynamism is what is required in yoga also. Because in yoga also become passive, you don't move. In fact, that is why Sri Aurobindo says, if in yoga you suppress your vital, and if the vital too long suppress, it withdraws, then you are dumped. So even in yoga, the vital or the rajas is very much important. The only thing is, instead of being the vital of the outer, you have the movement of the inner. So this energy is the same. Either you utilize it outer enjoyment or the inner joy, but the energy is the same. So he would say that guided by this sattva, he could become a different instrument here. And dominated by sattva, man seeks in the midst, this is the third one. Dominated by sattva, man seeks in the midst of the strife for a principle of law, right, poise, harmony, peace and satisfaction. Now the third person, when he is dominated by the sattvic guna of knowledge, etc., he is striking the principle of law and right and harmony and peace. So sattvic man is trying to find the harmony and peace in his society, in his existence, in his individual being. So he is the balancer, one who really creates this kind of equilibrium. The purely sattvic man tends to seek this within, whether for himself alone or with an impulse to communicate it, when one to other human minds, but usually by a sort of inner detachment from or else an outer rejection of the strife and turmoil of the active world energy. But if the sattvic mind accepts partly the rajasic impulse, it seeks rather to impose this poise and harmony upon the struggle and apparent chaos to vindicate a victory for peace, love and harmony over the principle of war, discord and struggle. Now you see, this is the other way. When the sattvic man, if he is purely sattvic, pretty much a higher level of sattvic person, like we have this Yudhishthir, a wonderful sattvic personality. But what does he do? That he seeks within, whether for himself alone or with an impulse to communicate it, when one to other human minds, but usually by a sort of inner detachment. The Yudhishthir was known for this kind of an attachment, detachment, this attitude, where he will say that we will have harmony and peace and satisfaction, etc. So he wants to gain this within himself. And sometimes he communicates it to the others. So sattvic people, they love this peace and harmony and all that, but touch me not. I am living in my own Eiffel Tower. And an Eiffel Tower in which he has found that peace within. He is not just pretending. He is not the inertia, tamasic man who is lazy, but he has found something, but then he says, touch me not. That is the pure Yudhishthir type, the sattvic moral type. But there's a combination of sattvic with rajasic. That is an ideal combination, because we see that if the sattvic man accepts partly the rajasic impulse, it seeks rather to impose this poise and harmony upon the struggle and apparent chaos. So the difference is, purely sattvic man, he is withdrawn. But sattvic rajasic person, he tries to bring this harmony, this joy, this oneness in the society, in the community, in the family. And that is better, because you are not living for yourself alone, you are living for the community. You are trying to bring about a harmony in the community. All the attitudes adopted by the human mind towards the problem of life either derive from the domination of one or other of these qualities, or else from an attempt at balance and harmony between them. Of course, there is a note here that nobody is purely sattvic, or nobody is purely tamasic, or nobody is purely rajasic. There's always, one could be a dominant factor, but there is always this other second factor which is helping. So we are either sattvic rajasic, or rajasic tamasic, or tamasic sattvic. There's a combination. Nobody is a pure 1, 2, 3. But there comes also a stage in which the mind recoils from the whole problem, and dissatisfied with the solutions given by the three modes of nature, Three Guna, seeks for some higher solution outside of it, or else above it. It looks for an escape either into something which is outside and void of all qualities, and therefore of all quality, or in something which is superior to the three qualities and master them, and therefore at once capable of action and unaffected, undominated by its own action in the nirguna or the trigunatita. So when we have this trigunatita, is beyond the three gunas. Now what Sri Aurobindo is telling us, this is bringing us back to Arjuna actually. He is now coming back to the same theory of why Arjuna was dejected. So he says, so normally we have these three gunas, and admixture of these three gunas guide our life. But sometimes the disillusion could be so strong, you are depressed. You know the great word depression. I'm undergoing a deep depression for a long time, quote unquote. Many people give us this kind of a thing. Or disillusionment. You are thoroughly disillusioned with the life around you, with the people around you, with the job around you. You say, this man has ditched and that man has really cheated me and I cannot believe this is happening. All kind of disillusionment. In the sense, sometimes you are disillusioned with God Himself. It's a God Himself has betrayed me. So, out of this disillusionment, there are two attitudes that can come about. One, reject life, escape from this life. So you say escape either into something which is outside and void of all qualities. So one is escape, that's suicide. The other is escape, the spiritual nirvana. You say, I will come out of this life, you go into the mountains, you go into the forest, be cool, you want to get into that higher consciousness. So outside and void of all qualities and therefore of all quality activity. So you commit a suicide physically, or you commit a spiritual suicide because you want to leave this world and go and live for yourself. That is, both of them are an escapist attitude, physical or spiritual. But there is the other attitude, the healthy, the Gita type, that is, you go beyond the three gunas into a higher spiritual consciousness. So he says, into which is superior to the three qualities and master of them, and therefore at once capable of action and unaffected. So if you go to that consciousness beyond which Sri Krishna tells us, that could be something from where you can act and yet be unaffected. So as we said oftentimes, it's like the boat, the paper boat, which is there, we put it on the water, it sails. Or even a common boat, if you see the bigger boat, it's riding over the waters. So that way you are moving over the waters of life but unaffected by it. And yet you are moving, you are not stopping. So that is the other one. It aspires to an absolute peace and unconditioned existence, or to a dominant calm and superior existence. The natural movement of the former attitude is toward the renunciation of the world, sannyasa, of the latter toward the superiority to the claims of the lower nature and its whirl of actions and reactions, and its principle is equality and the inner renunciation of passion and desire. Well, this is what we have said, that one is sannyasa, the other is the Gita yogin. The Gita yogin who really goes beyond this lower nature and its whirl of action and reactions, and there is a sannyasa is what normally it is understood as renunciation of the outer. That is the classic description. That I have taken sannyasa hood, I have completely renounced everything, my comforts, my this thing, my TVs, my car, anything that technology brings me. But the other person, the Gita person, is the renunciation of desire, not of object. So this is where we must make a distinction. Don't renounce the object. What has object got to do? I may have all the TVs and all the VCDs and all the entertainment, everything around me, and yet I may be disconnected. Of course, it is easier said than done, I understand that. But we are talking about the principle. One is renunciation of object, the other is renunciation of desire. So Gita says, take the second one. So be in the world, you can have all the mobiles and all the telephones and all the equipment, and yet, if you are not attached to that. It's easy to throw the object and say, hey, I am not attached. But that is easy said, because you never achieve that. Because first time you may get a lovely, attractive mobile, you will say, hey, lovely, give it to me, I want it. Because you are not renounced the desire, you are thrown away the object only. And if you throw away one object, the same desire will establish itself in another object, which seemingly is very small, but the desire element is there. So the Gita, and we have seen this in the synthesis also many times, where Sri Aurobindo says, take to sannyasa hood in the right meaning, that is renunciation of passion and desire. So that is the means of living the Gita way, that be in the world. You are in America with all the comforts. You are in India with all the discomforts. But the same detachment should be there. Because throwing away the objects and claiming yourself to be a sannyasin is easy. But the true yogin is one who renounces passion and desire. The former is the first impulse. This is the beautiful sentence of Arjuna reconciling from the calamitous culmination of all his heroic activity in the great cataclysm of battle and massacre, Kurukshetra. Losing his whole past principle of action, inaction, and the rejection of life, and his claims seem to him the only issue. But it is an inner superiority and not to the physical renunciation of life and action that is called by the voice of the divine teacher. So now we understand ultimately what is happening in the Gita in a very simple manner. Arjuna starts with the renunciation of objects, renunciation of the external world, which was characterized by his, Dronacharyas and Bhishmas and Gurus and Pitrus, all that. That is the external. He wanted to renounce that and go to sannyasa, and thought that renouncing the object is a very superior quality of life. But by the end, he is shown and he realizes the renunciation of desire. When he renounces desire, then Lord says, arise, Arjuna, and fight. Now Arjuna comes back to the battle. He is a renewed man. He is now a true yogi who acts in the world without desire, without expectation, without passion. So such is the Gita Yogin, and we have seen these remarkable qualities in Sri Aurobindo. As if he was born with these qualities. Every time we see Sri Aurobindo, He acts, he leaves behind, he doesn't even look behind for what may happen, what am I leaving behind, my wife or my country or my... nothing. No expectation. But when he acted in that in Bengal, I mean, you know the amount of writing he did, so much active. But one little call, leave Calcutta, go to Chandanagar. He just gets up from his table, 4 p.m. or whatever the time. He goes to the ghat and catches the first boat to Chandanagar. So this is absolute detachment. No hankering, oh, why did I leave? I could have become the Congress president or the prime minister of the country. Nothing. So that is that detachment. So he acted fully, and such a man alone can really contribute to the human society. Not you and me who are attached to things and we have our own little agenda to achieve this, to achieve that, to achieve moksha, to achieve shanti, to achieve peace. He never asked for all that. He said, I'm here to liberate the country and I'll do my best. Finish. After that, he didn't even care what will happen, because Lord Krishna said, you go ahead. And he got this adesh that go to Chandanagar. Then he says to Pondicherry. So that is the perfect, no reactions. There's no anger that why am I being called. He never argued with that adesh. Hey, look, I'm doing such an important work in Vande Mataram. Why should I leave? Never, no question. No questions asked. Adesh, follow. And as cool as ever. Even when he goes to Chandanagar, it's darkness. The boat is there in the ghat. Nobody to receive him. But he just sent his assistant, go to this person. And the person to whom the assistant went, he refused to bring him Sri Aurobindo. Because he said, oh, he's a person who is sought out by the Britishers. So he did not get agitated. What's going to happen? Am I going to be caught by the police? So you see this man full of trust, full of detachment. And he knew God will guide him. And then someone else comes and takes him to his house, etc. That story, you know that. So that is what is the Arjuna. Arjuna the first, Arjuna the second. This is the difference. Arjuna is the Kshatriya, the Rajasic man who governs his Rajasic action by a high Sattvic ideal. He advances to this gigantic struggle, to this Kurukshetra, with a full acceptance of the joy of battle, as to a holiday of fight, but with a proud confidence in the righteousness of his cause. He advances in his rapid chariot, tearing the hearts of his enemies with the victorious clamor of his war conch. For he wishes to look upon all these kings of men who have come here to champion against him the cause of unrighteousness and establish as a rule of life the disregard of law, justice and truth, which they would replace by the rule of selfish and arrogant egoism. So once he returns to the battlefield, you see, for him it is a holiday of fight. Because now he has got the true motivation. And with the true motivation, you see now his energies are double, triple, 10 times more. So he becomes, now before he was an Arjuna with a Gandiva. But now he is the Arjuna with Sri Krishna behind him. The Supreme Lord himself. It is not one astra he has. He has the whole Lord behind him. So you can imagine the energies, the consciousness, the flow that is behind him is incredible. So for him, it becomes, he says, that's why he advances in his rapid chariot, tearing the hearts of his enemies with the victorious clamor of his war conch. So he is a renewed man. He is the real fighter now, who is fighting for the divine. Before he was fighting for his clan. Now he is fighting for the divine, for the new dharma. So he is now all these people, he knows what is their true motivation. When this confidence is shattered within him, when he is smitten down from his customary attitude and mental basis of life, it is by the uprush of the tamasic quality into the rajasic man, inducing a recoil of astonishment, grief, horror, dismay, dejection, bewilderment of the mind and the war of reason against itself, a collapse towards the principle of ignorance and inertia. So in the beginning, what happened? For this great Rajasic man, it is inertia that pulls him down, the tamas. You see, it is not just Arjuna, it's all of us. How disappointment pulls us down to tamas. And that is why within a split moment, imagine he was there, he came to the army, he was standing there ready to fight. And within those few minutes when he traveled from his spot to the center of the army, something happened. And he got pulled down into tamas. And then once the tamas came in, then all his confidence was shattered. So immediately grief, horror, dismay, dejection, everything takes over him. So that is called the lower consciousness. If you live continuously in the tamas or the lower consciousness, you cannot expect anything but depression and dejection and horror and grief and bereavement and all that. It's the quality of the lower consciousness. It's not the question of going to a psychiatrist or a doctor or talking to this man. You have plumbed yourself into that lower consciousness, so you are having the consequence of that consciousness. So what do? It is not the medication that helps. It is pulling yourself back into the higher consciousness of Rajasic. So if you come to the Rajas, automatically the Rajasic consciousness of activity will take you up. So he says, better the life of the mendicant. Imagine the tamasic consciousness where it has reached. Better the life of the mendicant living upon alms than this dharma of the kshatriya. This battle and action culminating in undiscriminating massacre. This principle of mastery and glory and power which can only be won by destruction and bloodshed. This conquest of bloodstained enjoyments. This vindication of justice and right by a means which contradicts all righteousness. And this affirmation of the social law by a war which destroys in its process and result all that constitutes society. You see, you cannot blame Arjuna. It is a type of consciousness. That is why today we speak about the growth and change of consciousness. As long as you are in that consciousness, all this is logical. Did we not say that what Arjuna said is perfectly logical? Step 1, step 2, step 3 are perfect. But they are logical on this tamasic level. But Sri Krishna looks at it from that high spiritual level where this logic of the lower level doesn't function. So from his point of view, all this is good. It's better to be a beggar, a mendicant, than to be a kshatriya because of all these results. So, with the falling into the tamas, he had all this experience. But sannyasa is the renunciation of life and action and of the threefold modes of nature, but it has to be approached through one or other of the three qualities. The impulse may be tamasic, a fleeing of impotence, fear, aversion, disgust, horror of the world and life. Or it may be the rajasic quality tending towards tamas, an impulse of weariness of the struggle, grief, disappointment, refusal to accept any longer this vain turmoil of activity with its pains and its eternal discontent. Or the impulse may be that of rajas tending towards sattva, the impulse to arrive at something superior to anything life can give, to conquer a higher state, to trample down life itself under the feet of an inner strength, which seeks to break all bounds and transcend all limits. You see, Aurobindo is going again into the subtle nature of this renunciation. See, this renunciation of life and action can be again on the three levels. It could be a renunciation of tamas. That means where you are afraid, when you have disgust and horror. That is the tamasic renunciation that got into Arjuna. Because he says, this is the horror of war, this is the disgust of the bloodshed. So that is one kind of renunciation which is called the tamasic renunciation. But there could be a possibility that we have a rajasic renunciation also. You see, beautifully he says, impulse of the weariness of struggle, strife, disappointment, refusal to accept any longer. You see, you're tired of life, you see there are so many problems everywhere you go, this struggle and that struggle. You say, I have not achieved much, I've been struggling all my life. So why this is a meaningless life? So that is a Rajasic tamas which can pull you into the tamasic tamas itself. So the tamasic renunciation. Or you see, this is a fine one, the other one, that it could be the impulse to arrive at something superior to anything life can give to conquer a higher state. That is the sattvic rajasic tamas or renunciation, where you are trying to be a sadhu, you want to achieve a peace of mind, you want to achieve a psychic being, you want to achieve this. But you say, 30 years I've been meditating, nothing is happening. I think this spirituality is no good for me. Because you have had this kind of a higher ambition, and if you don't realize that, you may again renounce and say, no, I'll go back to my job in Pondicherry or in Delhi or Calcutta or Los Angeles. This kind of an Aurobindo life with all its struggles, where does it lead to? And there's neither a gain, nor this, nor that, neither name, nor money. These are the renunciation that come in different fields, different modes. And then this is the sattvic, that's what we said. Or it may be sattvic, an intellectual perception of the vanity of life and the absence of any real goal or justification for this ever-cycling world existence, or else a spiritual perception of the timeless, the infinite, the silent, the nameless, and the formless peace beyond. But this is more or less the Buddhist style. When you find no meaning in this world existence, you say, all this is suffering, eternal is suffering. So let me get into that silence, let me get into that nirvana, let me get into that infinite timelessness. The recoil of Arjuna is the tamasic recoil from action of sattvic, rajasic man. We have said this before, that Arjuna, his renunciation is tamasic, neither rajasic nor sattvic, because he is what? He is plagued by this horror of action, this horror of war. So it is this that is there. Fear, aversion, disgust and horror. These are the qualities of Arjuna's rejection. So he calls it that this is the tamasic recoil. And the teacher may confirm it in its direction, using it as a dark entry to the purity of peace of the ascetic life. Or he may purify it at once and raise it towards the rare attitudes of the sattvic tendency of renunciation. In fact, he does neither. That's very subtle. Sri Krishna could have said, no, there is a meaning in this life. There's nothing horror. You don't have to be afraid. You are after all a Kshatriya, you must be going beyond that. In fact, if you see in this Gita's argument, Sri Krishna adapts all this from the tamasic. He is now giving him a courage as a rajasic. He says, you are a Kshatriya. As a Kshatriya, this is your duty. So he is whipping him up to the level of the rajas, the Kshatriya. Then he whips him up to the level of the sattva, where there is a detachment. Then he takes him to the level of the spiritual, complete renunciation of the outer, the desire. So these are techniques. Now you see psychologically how Sri Krishna utilizes all of them. He says he discourages the tamasic recoil and the tendency to renunciation and enjoins the continuation of action and even of the same fierce and terrible action. But he points the disciple towards another and inner renunciation, which is the real issue from his crisis and the way toward the soul's superiority to the world nature and yet its calm and self-possessed action in the world. Not a physical asceticism, but an inner asking is the teaching, but an inner ascesis is the teaching of the Gita. So we have the last line here, that all the time when Sri Krishna talks about the action versus non-action, you see how Sri Krishna is taking the trouble of really, he knows the level of Arjuna, but to convince a man, to bring up a man from the tamasic renunciation to the rajasic, to the sattvic, to the spiritual renunciation, which is the ultimate renunciation of desire and passion. So it is the ascesis, it is not asceticism, but ascesis is the teaching, and inner ascesis means the inner discipline, the inner tapasya that Sri Krishna gives him. So you see, it is a fantastic psychological treatment of the patient called Arjuna. So nowadays, if you go to a psychiatrist, what kind of a treatment we get? Because the doctor himself, he doesn't know what's happening. He sees some symptoms, he sees this is the pills. But here we see the real treatment. So step by step, Sri Krishna achieves this elevation of consciousness and transformation of consciousness in Arjuna. And then after all that, at that level, then he says, Sarva Dharman Parityajya. You see, when you reach only there, that you see the Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. Then he says, I will relieve you of all sin, mas sucha. He will not tell the man of the tamasic inertia or the tamasic renunciation that Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. If he says that, then the tamasic fellow will become more tamasic. He will leave all work. He says, no, I am happy. Even the Lord tells me to leave all Sarva Dharman. But the Lord tells you to leave all dharma after you have gone through all the dharmas of the tamas, of the rajas, of the sattva. So you can see the beauty of this teaching, the integrality of this teaching, and how it applies today as it was applied to Arjuna too. So friends, I think we have won a small battle. We have been able to keep to our target. Well, I don't think I have rushed through, but some people may think it to be. But I've tried to maintain the logic of the thought and given you some explanation where it was necessary. Otherwise, most of it, as you can see, was, we could grasp some of it. Well, so we come to the end, and it's only later in our next session that we'll start with chapter 7.